Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi Achint. India-Canada spat. That's probably the only way to describe it. To discuss that and more, I have with me former Foreign Secretary of Bharat, Ambassador Kanwal Sibal. Sir, good afternoon and welcome to the show. I'm looking forward to hearing from a former diplomat as to what this game is, because this doesn't seem like diplomacy to me in any way. Opening statement, sir. What do you feel? Namaskar.
Well, I'm a bit surprised at the uh, level at which Trudeau has descended in terms
Mhm.
of confronting India. Any normal politician would not do what he has done, which means that there is something very abnormal in his mental makeup and in his political judgment. Even if he needs the support of the local Sikh community for his re-election, but is that the be-all and end-all of Trudeau's political vision, that actively destroying relationship with a major country like India, which is actually now becoming more and more sought after for a variety of reasons by international partners. Uh, Canada can survive without India, surely, but so can India survive without Canada.
Yeah.
But the point is that it is true that both countries can survive without having to depend on each other. But nevertheless, what is really happening is, from Canada's point of view, that they're being locked out from a country of the size of India, 1.4 billion people, fifth largest economy, 2030 likely to be the third largest economy by 2047. In the judgment of IMF, World Bank, uh, potentially the second largest economy in the world, uh, outpacing even the United States of America. Now, this is the future. That's one part. The other part is that there are a lot of people of Indian origin in Canada. They're not only Sardar, there are other communities too. So any sensible leader has to take a holistic view that if you are going to deal with India, it's not going to be only on the basis of what the extremists in Canada seek to do, which is
Mhm.
actually to disrupt India-Canada ties because it suits their agenda. And then you actively cosset them, protect them, encourage them, uh, you know, uh, depend on them for your own political survival, yield space to them, all in the interest of retaining personal power. So, to my mind, Trudeau is an astonishingly immature politician, astonishingly immature politician. And uh, I might even say that there is some genetic problem there because his father was
Yeah.
equally uh, equally anti-Indian in his general sentiment, to the point of doing the same thing that the son is doing, even more, of protecting the Sikh extremists. You know, the Parma case and the Air India bombing, and his refusal to arrest him, despite Indian pleas, despite India warning him that this guy is a terrorist, and then took no action against him even after the Air India flight was downed in the Atlantic. So he's inherited that. So it's a small-minded politician uh, stuck up in a country which is in one corner of the world, has the world's most powerful country as its neighbor, which is protecting it, and because of piggybacking on the United States, part of G7. I mean, what is their credentials for being part of the G7? They they box above their weight. It has no military strength. It has reasonable economy, but nothing in terms of innovation or anything else. There's nothing very much that Canada can boast about. Uh, so it's a kind of a country that feels a sense of privilege, and I think what the Trudeau is smarting under is that how can a third world country, a developing country, caucus look at me? I'm Canada. I'm what I am, a white man's country, well, that kind of stuff. Uh, so whether he realizes it or not, he seems to have some kind of racial arrogance about him in the manner in which he dealing with India. But it's not only that. There is something irrational about him also when he sort of dealt with China.
Hmm.
On the one hand, he's been very open to China. He's actually had military cooperation with China. They had joint training with Chinese armed forces in winter warfare. Now, where the hell is China is going to do winter warfare except in the Himalayas? But he was doing that. At the same time, he arrested the daughter of the Huawei person,
Hmm.
Huawei head, and kept her under jail for 2 years because the Americans wanted that. So he also serves the interests of the United States of America and willing to actually take the heat because of that. So you can see what kind of a person he is and what kind of politics he has. Effectively, what he has done now is that the diplomatic relations between India and Canada have collapsed. It's not only the ambassador, after all, Pakistan and India also don't have ambassadors in each other country, right? But nevertheless, the diplomatic ties are still there. There's some kind of functioning in terms of the two missions. But when you have no ambassador and the six of your top officers are also uh, uh, expelled both ways, or in our case, we withdrew them and expelled six of their officers, the acting high commissioner, the deputy high commissioner, four first secretaries. How can the mission run? How can our mission run there? So effectively, diplomatic ties have collapsed. And who will
Hmm.
suffer? Who will suffer? Basically, it's the Indian origin community that will suffer. Uh, and most of them, especially the non-Khalistanis and the Hindus and all, they have no part in this whole thing, but they are the ones who are going to suffer because they won't be able to travel if there's some calamity in the family here, if there's emergency, they will have great difficulty, this and that. They have never, Trudeau has not thought through the problems that he has created for himself. And I hope because of the impact of his actions on the community that he's trying to woo, uh, the rest of the community will pay him back when the elections come. And I hope he doesn't get re-elected, but I don't know. But I don't.
Sir, his own party, by the way, signed a declaration. There are certain liberal MPs that have signed a letter saying that get rid of this guy before he ruins us. So they are asking for his resignation more than anything else. His own party, by the way.
Yeah, but
So.
I didn't mention this. Of course, we know this. Nothing new. Look at the
Hmm.
manner in which they fated this Nazi fellow in the
Hmm.
parliament. Huh?
Hmm.
In fact, Trudeau met him before, man,
Yeah.
personally. And then in the parliament, they all stood up and gave him an ovation till it was revealed that he was actually a Nazi. And they still not revealed how many Nazis sought refuge in Canada. So there is a canker in their system, this highly right wing canker in their system, which they have been trying to hide. Uh, so there are perversions in that society, and
Hmm.
frankly, I shouldn't be saying so. It's not very diplomatic, but he's a product of those perversions, frankly.
Looks seem absolutely surely looks like that, sir. There is something seriously wrong with these guys as far as basic sense is concerned. So when we look at something like this, this whole thing cannot be done without the permit of the big brother down south. That's the Americans, and the Americans have another beef with us with regards to that whole Pannu nonsense. Now, do you think this is a combined effort from both of them who are trying to put some pressure on India?
Look, uh, I would say that even the Americans would be embarrassed by what he has done because he's gone too far.
Yeah, it's gone too far.
And I can't justify it. Now, if you look at what the Americans have done, yes, they have tried to put us in the dock. They tried to embarrass us. They met the Khalistani fellow just before Prime Minister went to the summit, Quad summit, and his visit to the UNGA.
Hmm.
Uh, So, and on the Panu affair, they've kept the whole thing alive. Uh, but all said and done, it has been within the realm of some, uh, how would I say, diplomatic caution
Mm.
that the relationship is very important. But from their point of view, we cannot accept what India has done. But we will try and separate the two to the extent possible. Go ahead with our relationship because of larger geopolitical ties. That relationship is important, and we can't sacrifice it. But we'll keep the heat on India, but heat on in such a way that the congressional sentiment and some other sentiment in the country which views what, from their point of view, what India has done is totally unacceptable, is to some extent mollified, but the
Mhm.
larger relationship is kept intact. But this guy has gone to the other extreme. And how would it serve America's interest to have effectively diplomatic ties between India and Canada collapsing? And what will then happen is that when the G7 meet, when they have their Five Eyes or whatever else, Canada will find it very difficult to justify what they've done because it'll come directly in clash with the overall reasons that others have to keep the India relationship intact. So I think he has crossed certain boundaries and limits. But in the background, in response to what you said, it is a fact that Blinken and Jake Sullivan have been saying quite openly and more than once that we are coordinating with Canada on
Mm.
this affair. And they have linked the Niger and Panu affairs. They have
Yeah,
done
that
that.
that silly little indictment
So,
that came in New York. Yes, sir.
so whether uh, Trudeau felt that his back was now covered by the Americans and he can do what he wants, and made a judgment call on that basis in upping the ante the way he has done, uh, is for him to explain. But to my mind, he has overplayed his hand and put the Americans in a difficult situation where when the State Department and the White House are asked questions, as they would be, about what their view is on what is happening between India and Canada, they can't abandon Canada. They can't give the impression that whatever they may feel internally, that Canada has gone out on a limb and choose India in some senses over Canada. They won't do that.
Yeah.
If they make some unpalatable statements from our point of view, this will unfortunately deepen the levels of distrust that are simmering below the surface in India-US relations.
A lot of people kind of put this across to a hard line that India has taken. I wish we could see that, because that's one of the complaints that I have with the government. I mean, they're doing a fantastic job as far as diplomacy and stuff like that is concerned, but they don't take hard lines when it's actually needed. A lot of people want to see that. The line that has been taken this time, sir, as a former diplomat, what do you say to that? I mean, I've never seen some language, personal language like this written by any Indian. We're supposed to be very mellow people. Here, we've literally taken Trudeau's proverbial trousers off and hung him upside down by the tree.
Because he went just too far. I mean, declaring our High Commissioner as a person of interest and some other diplomats as person of interest.
Mhm.
They actually are accusing him as a potential criminal. Now, if you think that the High Commissioner was involved in all this, declare him persona non grata and end the story.
So,
But halfway thing that he is a criminal and we want to find out how much of a criminal he is because we want to interrogate him, knowing that this is absolutely contrary to the Geneva, to the Vienna Conventions, and India will never allow it. They chose a confrontational path uh, in a manner which would have led nowhere, and which would just put the backs of India up. And after what Trudeau said, uh, when the ASEAN meeting took place, and he tried to accost Modi, and I've seen reports to the effect that Modi told him this is not the time and place, and he must have smarted under that snub. So he was public. and says that I have to protect the security of my community and this and that, basically talking down at India, talking down at Modi, and treating India as a criminal organization.
Mm.
Uh, and then this note that they gave, a formal note to us about the High Commissioner and everybody else. I think the result of that, all gloves were off, and India issued this remarkably strong statement, unusually strong statement, even harking back to the fact that he had come to India on a visit which which he misused for electoral purposes, and talking about uh, hostility of Trudeau against India. Strong statement by us, but well deserved.
I mean, when you see something like that, so what goes through your mind when you see some a statement like this? Is this that what is India trying to convey to the rest of the world?
It's a message to some others too. As I
Yeah.
said in one of my tweets, that it's all right, we sent a very strong message, but to Canada, but
Mhm.
others are also watching. Those who are involved in protecting and encouraging the Sikh community, the Khalistanis, not the Sikh community, the pro-Khalistani communities in their own countries, would now understand that India can bite back and bite back very strongly. And this will hopefully instill some caution in them about how they deal with these fellows in their own territories. Uh, the UK in particular, uh, Australia less so. Australia has been distancing itself
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
from Trudeau. I've seen the statements of the High Commissioner here. He's been cautious. Uh, uh, New Zealand has been a little more aggressive, and United States, as I explained just now, uh, both wants to keep the pot boiling, but also ensure that the water doesn't boil over. It starts
What do they
scalding it.
want from us?
Who,
This
who
whole so-called Western world.
Nothing. They can get nothing from us. It's just tarnishing our image, tarnishing Modi personally, tarnishing the Hindutva ideology. Because in the latest article that has appeared in the Washington Post, this is the thrust that nationalist Hindu nationalist India is going berserk and is engaging in transnational repression. And they have even pointed the finger at Amit Shah.
Yeah,
Can you
I
can you imagine the levels to which they have gone? And I wish I said that earlier. I don't think this will happen because this will cause a crisis in our ties with the United States. We should
Mhm.
expel Jerry Shee. He's playing politics in this country,
Yep.
open politics in this country. He's not a correspondent. He's a political activist. Send him out. But I don't think we would do that because that will open up another front on this freedom of expression and nonsense like that. When we see them, how they deal with freedom of expression now in their own country, and in terms of the curbs they have put on the Russian media, for instance.
I mean, you have what's her name? Hillary Clinton, who came out and said, until unless we don't control how people think about various things, how do we kind of win elections? She actually said that, and I was like, whoa,
No, no,
okay,
now they want to put curbs on the social media. Now, when
yeah,
we put curbs on social media, when there was violence in Kashmir or in other parts of the country, internet was um, restricted temporarily. We got a lot of flack on this from the United States and others. And now, all the concerns that we had about how the social media and disinformation and fake
all gone.
news really
Mm.
cause problem, uh, all the concerns we have now, they're expressing the same concerns and justifying what they intend to do. So it's okay if they do it when faced with real problems, but when we do it faced with real problems, is unacceptable. But for them, it is acceptable. The typical case of double standards, but more than double standards, is incapacity to think beyond their own noses. That others also have problems and issues and ways of dealing with them, which in their own context is legitimate. But no, It is not legitimate from their point of view based on certain abstract principles. But when it comes to facing those very problems in their own country, then they discard those abstract principles and do exactly what they condemn us for.
So long term, I mean, India-US relations are up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. One doesn't know how to put its finger onto it. But long term, where do you see this? You've got an election coming up. Um, I mean, if you look at both these countries together, one prime minister literally doesn't have his majority in the house. Um, there are massive issues, and as a matter of fact, there are. I mean, he's not standing on a strong wicket. The other side, you see that the Democrats. I mean, one can say that they would do some chal kapat, if I may use that word, and get back to power. But there is always that threat that the Democrats won't. So, what do you see this whole game going forward? Because somewhere something's got to break. I mean, India is tolerating the US for a long time now. Somewhere something will break. And if the reaction comes like this with the US as well, how do you kind of picture this?
See, the United States is a very complex relationship. There are so many elements of the relationship which are important to us in terms of our future. Now, if you look at investments, levels of trade, especially access to technology, uh, which other country can give us this? Certainly not China, although China does have some niche technologies which are very significant, but given the state of our relationship and other factors, no. Russia is not in the same league insofar as these things are concerned. Europe has some technologies, but you have to deal with individual countries, and none of those countries has the kind of spread of these technologies that America has. So America is essentially the same source, and only source. The other is that we've seen how, well, Japan at one time had a lot of technologies and they built up Southeast Asia, but Japan now is a sort of a stagnant country in many ways. Uh, so uh, India therefore has to, in its own self-interest, in a longer term perspective, swallow some things that come from the United States, but look at the broader picture and see where it can benefit from the relationship going ahead. Uh, it is, we if you really look at our trade, more and more it is veering towards the West. Our
Mhm.
FTAs are mostly the future FTAs. I include Australia as part of the West. Are
Yeah, of
going
course.
towards the West. Uh, our exports are generally going towards the West. With ASEAN, we are having a mounting deficit. With China, we are having a mounting deficit. Uh, People to people ties. We have no other country with which where we have uh, such a uh, such a large, but we have a diaspora in the Middle East too, or West Asia, but such a large and such a qualified, educated, uh, rich uh, diaspora. And if you look at what they're doing in the technology field, it's remarkable. What you now see that they're becoming more and more a part of the political process in the United States. When I was in Washington, if we had one or two Indians who became staffers with congressmen, we saw that as a big victory for ourselves.
Great
That we-
achievement. Hmm.
And now you look at the number of Indian origin people, not that because they're of Indian origin, therefore they're friendly towards us or they are totally that we they think like us and they're not Americans. I'm not making that point. What I mean is that they have entered the political system too in a
Mhm.
big way.
Mhm.
And this is not paralleled anywhere else, except perhaps in Britain. But in Britain, you have a lot of Pakistani types who got into the political system and create huge issues for us. Anyway, so my point is that if 80% of our relationship with the United States gives positive benefits to us, and 20% is problematic for us, then what does a sane government do? Then look, we are on the cusp of becoming uh, more and more uh, um,
Stronger and developing and stuff.
the economic power and this and that and that. With that will then come other things, a place in the world, our military strength, and everything else, which will give us even more leverage vis-a-vis the United States.
Mm. Mm.
Therefore, let's play for time. Let's take the maximum advantage and swallow some of the problems that are there in the relationship, because the disparity in power is such that we cannot insulate ourselves from those negative features. The American press, the academia, the think tanks, uh, elements of the deep state, uh, they, they, they are not friendly towards India. But at some other levels, uh, they have time for India, and they're looking at India in a larger geopolitical perspective. Plus, of course, that's where the future goodies lie. With 1.4 billion people, rising economy, and all the perspectives that we have about how we'll become third and whatever else economy in the world, where will they get this kind of a market? And with China now becoming a peer competitor and feeling threatened by China, uh, where is the safe haven? Europe is saturated. Europe is not growing. Where is the safe haven for their own future economic well-being? It is India stands out. Of course, there are other countries, Vietnam or some countries in Southeast Asia. They're small countries, small population. They don't have the scale. So therefore, they have to compromise, despite the fact that there are currents in their own countries which have long-standing, deep-rooted prejudices against India, especially against Hindus. I mean, this business about Hinduism and this and that, this is just a cover of anti-Hinduism, frankly. So, and that's where the evangelists and all that stuff comes in, and the Christians and the conversions and stuff like that. After all, when the U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom slams us, why do they slam us? Large part because of the fact that we put curbs on their NGOs and foundations
Mhm.
uh, who've been uh, who've been evangelists in this country, and been involved in conversions. So anyway, this is the long and short of it. As practitioners of politics or diplomacy, with the national interest in view, uh, one has always to take decisions where you maximize your advantages and minimize your disadvantages to the extent that you can. And I think we are on the right path in that sense. That's why, for example, you take the Quad. Why are we then stressing far more the non-security part of Quad? Because this places us in a position where we can be beneficiaries of technology and trade, uh, other things that we need for our future growth, investments, and all. So that's why we stress on that, and it also gives us a position in internet on the international landscape, which alone we could not have to
True.
that to
Mhm.
that extent. So that is why we are also in the Quad and SCO, because it gives us a higher international profile, more bargaining power, uh, which is also a very thoughtful policy on our part. That while we want to get closer to the United States to maximize our benefits from them, but in order to leverage that to our advantage, we must also continue to signal that we also have options, and that's a reason why we have also um, we have membership of the other groups which have an agenda which suits our longer term uh, interests in preventing uh, the Western hegemony uh, from which the rest of the world has suffered for centuries.
Yeah, that is true. Lastly, sir, I'd ask you again, as a diplomat, when you say, this thing is it's an issue, and diplomats are kind of meant to wade through these issues and figure out how to solve them. How do you see the relations between India and Canada specifically, and India and the US, or the so-called G7 Five Eyes? However, you know what I mean. The power lies, of course, in Washington D.C. in the State Department. How do you see this whole thing going forward? What is it that you would advise the government to do at a time like this, sir?
Well, in the case of Canada, the relationship for the time being is in cold storage.
Hmm.
Well, that's one way of putting it, or, in the sense that the the substance of the relationship has got eroded very badly. Though, mind you, I was speaking to someone today who handles Canadian pension funds, which are making good money,
30 billion. Yeah.
and I understand that there is no move by these fellows to move their pension funds out of India because that's where they get their returns. So that part will continue, but at the political level, the relationship will take time to reestablish. Now, if Odierre, the opposition leader, if he gains power, uh, he may try and mend relations. Uh, well, whether he will have enough political uh, strength in the country to oppose these pro Khalistan extremist lobbies and control them, because he's also been going to gurdwaras,
Hmm.
to get their support and this and that in the forthcoming elections. He doesn't want them to be completely in the Trudeau camp, on the liberal camp. Uh, so if he takes some hard decisions and tries to open up to India, there will be a bit of a backlash in the country because the opposition will say that, look, there's all this thing, transnational repression, India at the official level, at the state level, um, engaged in extremist activity, killings and this and that, and now you're befriending this country. What is the justification? Why are you bending before this country? That you'd have to meet that opposition at home. But maybe progressively things can begin to be sorted out, but it'll take time. Because the relationship has really taken a very severe blow, unprecedented. I mean, if you look, apart from Pakistan, we've not had this kind of a situation with any other country. Uh, Even with China, even when these wretched fellows attacked us in 1962, we didn't break off diplomatic relations. We kept them alive. Uh, and even now, after Doklam and after Galaban and this and that, we've had 20 rounds of these talks and 16 rounds of those talks and stuff like that. Even with China, this has not gone that far. And with this little country stuck up somewhere in North America, that this is happening is astonishing. With the United States, I explained just now that the prospects of the relationship, from our point of view, uh, remain positive, and there's a lot to gain from that relationship. But we have to be careful. We have to be careful because we should not allow our system to be so penetrated by the United States that we lose their autonomy of action, which can happen. Our media, for example, I, the manner in which it presents news and takes all the cues from the West.
West.
Yeah. So, and that is where public opinion gets formed, and then the youngsters who are educated there imbibe those ideas, uh, which are causing havoc in the United States, U.S. society or Western society in general. So those ideas are absorbed very easily by the youngsters because there is no education system is what it is. It doesn't root you in your own values, in your own civilization. In fact, I think things are changing, but they actually create a disrespect for your own tradition and your civilization. And that then will cost the country a great deal because society will be hollowed out. So, therefore, we have to be careful how much we allow the West to penetrate. But in a globalized, interconnected world with the kind of stuff that, kind of ideas, that flow of ideas all over, very difficult to control this.
Very
In
extremely. Yeah.
China can do it because they have the firewall. They don't let Western NGOs in the country. They don't allow access to Western reporting, Western news agencies. Nothing. We can't do it. And this is the other side of democracy. So, therefore, we have to be a little watchful about this and how to balance this. Open up to America, but not open up to the extent that we lose control over our own affairs progressively. Uh, so it'll require a lot of extremely deft handling of our own policies and everything else. That's where, insofar as Five Eyes and other things are concerned, uh, with Australia, we are making very good progress. Uh, I don't think that there is any real danger down the line. Uh, because Australia also is very concerned about China, and they want to have other options, and India provides that option. New Zealand doesn't matter very much, frankly. Um, and UK is always a very it's a dicey country to deal with, and they have never reconciled themselves to Indian domination of the Indian subcontinent. They've always been soft on Pakistan and Pakistani interests. So their capacity to use the Pakistanis against India has declined over the years,
Yeah.
in part because Pakistan has become dysfunctional. And their own weaknesses especially after Brexit, doesn't give them, and their economic situation today doesn't give them uh, that kind of power in the Indian subcontinent where they can be problematic for India. But they have within their own society the same kind of elements as in Canada and the United States. Of course, the United States is a much bigger country. Uh, so we have to watch out uh, about the US UK connection
Mhm.
in this regard. But UK on the whole, because of its relatively weakened position, is manageable. Is manageable.
Thank you, sir, for this, enlightenment, if I may, because this is a tough time, and I think people need some guidance to understand diplomacy, because a lot of rhetoric flies around the place. People fall for propaganda. People fall for narratives. People fall for motivated reports that have been put out by one way or the other. But we need to cut through the clutter, figure out what India needs to do going forward. National interest comes first, always. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure talking to you, sir. Jai Hind.
My pleasure. Jai Hind. Bye bye.